Greetings. My name is aguilar-izzo, and I am with the organization Talking Rivers. Together, we advocate for the rights of rivers and their more than human relations. This is part 2 of Deconstructing Ownership, Dismantling Colonialist Nations and Private Property. In the previous conversation, in part 1, Marina Jansen-Zafiris and Cassandra Ferreira came together to analyze what it means for land to be owned by humans. Together, they grapple with the history of colonization, commodification in the modern human world, and they delved into how we can all shift away from this destructive paradigm, acknowledging the right, spirit, and agency of land. Unfortunately, Johana Fernanda Sánchez Jaramillo wasn't able to participate in that conversation due to technical difficulties. So tonight, we bring you Fernanda. Fernanda is a researcher and academic activist who advocates for the rights of animals, Mother Earth, and indigenous communities. She's a doctorate in law from the University of Rosario in Colombia. This program was funded in part by Humanities New York with support from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities. In addition, this program is being recorded on the unceded territory of the Ganingahaga Mohawk Nation. In filming this conversation, I want to also express my deep gratitude to land, the tapestry of communities that brings life and nourishes us all. And without further ado, I'm going to ask Fernanda the first question. What does land mean to you? Can you describe your relationship with land?
Land means to me motherhood, and I have been able to build through the years to build an intimate relation with land. For me, is like is a mother, is a living entity which I respect and I care for, and I advocate for her too. It's part of my also academic activism because I am aware now that she is a woman like me. And when we talk about women issues and women oppression, I think we need to talk first about land oppression. So for me, is my mother, my sister, my ancestor, my relative. That's what I think about her, and is how I nurture my relationship with her.
Beautiful. Thank you, Fernanda. Thank you. And now, in light of that gorgeous answer, how can we legally shift away from the conception of nature, of Mother Earth, as a commodity, and honor nature's personhood?
It's really difficult, you know. I have been working on this issue from an academic perspective. I'm a lawyer, so I have been challenging this through my writing. Actually, my doctoral dissertation is about this. In this investigation, I challenge the ideas that we were told when we studied law, not just in Colombia, but around the world. We have been told at law school that nature is just a resource, that nature is just property, and that we can exploit her as much as we can. But when we look at that from using like a different lens, I'm using the lens of people who have been here before than us, like the Awa people that I talked in my research. I can see through their eyes that she is more than that, and that we need to look back to these people who build this strong relationship with land to understand what is behind the concepts that we were told at the school, because we cannot continue to perpetuate this idea. So I think we need to look back to indigenous people, farmers people, Afro people, and people who have this intimate relation with motherhood, with Mother Earth, sorry, to understand and to switch and enrich these legal categories inherited from Rome, from the US, from the Western actually, just to switch to a different approach to our relationship with her and now and the idea that we have about her. I also, when I was doing this research, I opened a questionnaire online, Google form in Facebook. 128 people answer about this because I was asking about how they perceive air, what do they think about nature rights, and most of them answer that it's critical to change the ideas that we have about her and also to care for her, to recognize its intrinsic value and to review the relationship that we have with her in order to respect and to give her the value she deserves. So I have been challenging these legal categories, which are useful to capitalism and to oppression and colonialism through my writing. Is how I have been presenting and telling the judges in this research, you know what? When you have a case that involves people relationship with land, you need to look at the problem through their lens, not through the Western lens, because you are not going to have the whole picture and you need to have a holistic approach of the matter. So that's what I'm doing as a researcher. That's what I do when I give talks nationally and international. I just want to persuade people that we need to change the chip that the old school give us and to challenge this to build a different perception about land and how we can relate to her.
Beautiful. Thank you. Just as a follow-up to that question specifically, I would love if you could delve in a little bit deeper and describe. You're speaking with people who are in courts of law. You're speaking with other fellow lawyers, people who are working within this legal framework. What avenues and possibilities do you give them? You're saying that they have to shift away from this colonialist conception of engaging with land legally. What options do they have? What can they do?
First of all, I have to say that when I present these kind of topics at my PhD school, it's like they just, some of them, not all of them, but some of them just laugh at me, because here is this crazy lady talking about mother air and animal rights and all these issues that not a lot of people care. So, but what I said to them always is, first of all, we need to review how we are studying law. If we are talking from the perspective of law, we need to embrace other ways of making laws. So I'm challenging the fact that we receive all the information from Rome, from the US, from Europe, and that's what we are receiving at school. So I'm telling that we need to incorporate within the faculties of law these subjects and from the perspective of other people, not just lawyers. Another uh, option or tool that I'm giving to them. It's just that I cannot say everything because I hope to publish my dissertation where I give these tools to the lawyers. But I'm telling the judges, first of all, you need to open your heart because I think it's also about feeling, about caring. It's just not about being like a machine, talking about a machine that produces law based on just regulation and that's all. And telling them you need to use other sources of knowledge, ancestral knowledge, farmers' knowledge, in order to build a strong category for the land and for Mother Earth. Another thing that I'm saying to them, we need, for the law, the judges and the attorneys need an approach that is intercultural. This means that we need to build a bridge between two two different worlds, you know, the Western and other people's views about Mother Earth. These are important. Also, we need to, and when I talk about an intercultural approach to law, I'm not talking about multiculturalism because I think that's really fake. Where what I experienced when I was living in Canada, and people often talk about multiculturalism. I think this is fake because it's just so. It's just too it's just that this gives the message that we need to be tolerant and respect. But when I talk about an intercultural legal practice, I'm talking about two words that can speak at the same level without hierarchy. It's what I did when I visited Jawa people in their territory. I just was there like if I were another one, not a researcher, just a person who is there to interact and to learn from them. So these are other things that I propose. I also propose taking some courses. I designed a course in my dissertation for judges in order to learn how to listen to other kinds of knowledge, like this ancestral knowledge. I also open up the need to uh, admit the fact that other living entities have agency. And for agency, I means they have will, like humans, like we have, like nature. Mother Earth speaks through the sun, to the trees, through the birds, to the any living entity has agency. But what happened is that from the Western society ignores this call, you know. But people who are there on a daily basis, they know how to speak to her, and they can be used as translators, interpreters for Mother Earth because they are the ones who know what she is saying. And they told me, for instance, there were people I built this, like I was so amazed and so impressed and touched and moved by the fact that they can read all these signals and they can understand what another living being is saying to them, and they share that with me, and I share that in my dissertation with the hope this knowledge is read by the judges and other lawyers, just to challenge a little bit the colonial approach to Mother Earth.
And continuing in this framework, I just wanted to also ask you a question about the rights of Mother Earth movement or the rights of nature movement. It was discussed during the conversation on deconstructing ownership, and there was mixed feelings about the rights of nature movement. And I would like to hear your own perspective in teaching and working with these judges and helping them realize different perspectives of Mother Earth. What do you think of the rights of nature movement?
Well, yeah, there are mixed feelings, and even I experienced these feelings at the beginning when I started to reflect about that. I think here, at least from Latin America, the mixed thing is when people are reflecting about is this effective or is not. But when I see it from the perspective that I just presented to you, from First Nations perspective, it makes sense. Do you know why? Because Mother Earth has rights for like thousands of years. People recognize this on a daily basis. It's just the law that is like from the 70s thinking about that. When Stone published his essay in the US in 1972, should trees have standing? He was reflecting about something that First Nations already know. And for First Nations, I'm not just talking about indigenous people, First Nations around the world, they know. When I met with the Awa, they knew this, but they didn't knew it from the legal perspective. When I presented to them, after I talked to them, after spending time with them, I gave a talk about nature rights, and they were impressed because what they do in their life, like they say, of course, she has rights because she's our mother, because she's a caring mother, because we have to respect her. She provides us with food, so she has rights. But from the legal perspective, it's challenging. Why? Because what we are seeing, at least in Colombia, is that judges are so like excited about giving mother air rights from the legal perspective. But when you look at the reality, is that all these rivers, regions, forests, parks that were given these rights in terms of the law, their situation is still the same. So that was my point also when I am researching, like, if we give this, if we acknowledge these rights from the law, how can we make this to be something really concrete, something tangible in terms of her protection? So from that side, I also have mixed feelings. But from the other side, when I think, oh, the law, the Western society, the Western lawyers and judges are taking into account an approach that belongs to First Nations, I think it's important, because it's saying, okay, this knowledge is so fundamental for our lives. But in terms of the effectiveness, is still in debate. What I said about Colombian case is that we need to give this more time to develop. I think that nature rights, from the law perspective, aren't like in teenage age. But it's something that the people practice in their territories on a daily basis. And that one is working for them. It's working for them because even Mother Earth is the one who controls the lives of others, their lives, the humans' lives, the other animal lives, the spiritual beings too. So from that perspective, it has been working for centuries. But we are just looking at the inconsistencies and contradictions from the Western law. And from that side, I have mixed feelings that I express in my research. And I develop like some ways to make this to work from the legal perspective in that document.
Well, really excited about all of your research. Very grateful for all of your research. And hopefully, as your research continues, we can get to learn more as you bring all of these ideas together. And thank you so much for that answer. And following along in this same river, I would like to discuss the correlations between the historical roots of the concept of land ownership, ownership of nature, and the present climate crisis. You spoke previously about how the legal structure that we all exist in, how that itself is colonialist and needs new air, needs new breath in order to actually be relevant nowadays. So I was wondering if you could discuss the concept of land ownership, but in light of the current climate crisis. And what are the connections between this private land ownership and the environmental exploitation we're seeing all around the world?
Yeah, I think when I was invited to the panel that I couldn't be part of for technical reasons, I was just reviewing my notes, but also going back to the ideas from some anarchists such as Proudhon, just challenging the idea of property. Because another thing that people should know about me is that I'm really fan of anarchist ideas. I think it's a way of life that we didn't try yet, and unfortunately, but to me, in my opinion, from my heart, it will work. It's just ideal. So I was reviewing about his ideas about property. I was also going back on my school years in law school when teachers were talking to us about hopes and all these contractualists, we call them, the ones who start saying that we cannot be free in nature. And they were the ones who installed this idea about, oh, if this person like capture this animal is property, you know, if you have this piece of land and you work on is your property. That concept doesn't exist within First Nations people, at least in the province where I live here in Colombia. They are really, and many people, they know that land is not a resource. Is not, you cannot have ownership of her because she is a living being. So they don't consider they own her, but we belong to her. On the other hand, but these ideas were building just because are useful to the ones who are rich, to the corporations. For instance, I was reviewing the fact that how this ownership status for Mother Earth is the base, is the foundation for her exploitation and abuse. I can tell that in Colombia, just a few amount of businessmen own most of the land here, but also we have this problem with corporations, mostly Canadians, I should say. And if you are thinking maybe why is she talking too much about Canada, is because I am a Canadian citizen and I lived there for 7 years and I just returned to Colombia. So how corporations are just keeping this idea and they are responsible for this climate crisis. As an example, I can mention mining, like mining in Colombia from Canadian corporations. Also, now we are invaded with these cannabis corporations. We have mostly Canadian cannabis corporations in Colombia, and I can tell from one examples that I wrote, an article about that in English, how the cannabis dream and how the Canadians came here to exploit cannabis, and they are dividing some people, indigenous people, because of that. So you can tell how you appropriate a piece of land and you do whatever you want with her. You know, you use this for your advantage, for mining, for mining, for cannabis, for anything, for avocado is another like huge problem in Latin America because transnational corporations went to countries like Chile and they just left the people without water because of the huge plantations of avocado, and then they just look for another place where they can do the same, and they are doing it here in Colombia. So is how this is the property approach, and this is linked to this big business that has nothing to do with being able to, okay, taking something from Mother Earth, but also giving back and not abusing her. This is a completely different idea because capitalism is our biggest enemy, I think. Just to mention something about the problems that we have, like social, environmental conflicts in Colombia produced by these kind of projects that corporations have here. I need to mention that the mining code in Colombia was written with the help of Canadian people. You know, it's just written for the ones who have the money. Another big issue is the corporations are the ones who have the money, the financial resources to lobby with the Congress people, with the politicians to just write the laws that they need just to continue exploiting Mother Earth. So you can see the link between the ownership and the climate crisis.
In relation to that last answer, I want to ask one of the last questions of the night, and that is, if we were going to unravel the complex knots of the system that treats nature, Mother Earth, and land as objects, and shift to a perspective in which we honor the agency, the personhood of these living beings that keep us all alive, that are, like you said, our mothers. Should it, within this colonial framework, within this settler colonial legal framework, should we try to have land be the owner of themselves, the land be the owner of herself? And what would that mean? What would it mean to shift, to take away the concept of ownership within the reality we're all living in currently, and honor the personhood and independence of land within the legal framework?
I think Mother Earth owns herself as we own our lives. It's just that she has been kidnapped by the system, by the colonial system that objectify her, but it has been like that for centuries. I'm going back again to the Agua people example in Nariño, Colombia, but also the Nasa people in Cauca, the province where I live. They don't consider they own her. She has her own. Actually, she owns us, like we belong to her. All the spirits, the small and bigger living entities are her living entities. So I think this idea is also nurtured for First Nations people like the Maori people. Like, let me give you an example. In 2014, if my memory is not incorrect, they signed this agreement with the colonists in New Zealand, and they recognize in this document that Mother Earth belongs to herself. She has ownership, but the reality is that what happens there, even though it's written in the piece of paper, the the government, the colonialist government, still has property of her. So I think from this First Nations perspective, it has been like that forever. We should fight the system in order to put things back the way they were before. Is that possible? I'm not sure. Is the fight worth it? I think so, for sure, because we are doing the best each person, wherever the person is at. Like in my case, from my academic activism, there were people giving their lives for Mother Earth and other people around the world. But what I'm just saying is that she is she owns herself because she's not a thing, she's a living being. She owns all what is around her. Like she organizes the life, people's life. She orders, like she organizes how life works uh, on a daily basis. Like let me give you an example. She, for instance, when a person goes to a place and Mother Earth just destroys this person, or think this person is coming here to me with bad intentions, she doesn't allow the person to see. For instance, if it's a lake, a river, a tree, or forest, she has her own ways to avoid to reject people. For me, this is just a proof that she owns herself as a living entity in the same way we own ourselves, but we have been all kidnapped, by the system. We were just talking before we started this interview how we became machines for the system, and it's the same for Mother Earth and for other animals besides the human animals. So I think it should be like a long fight to have that in place or implemented from a legal perspective. It's really difficult because what is a stake and what is dispute is like just financial resources, just profits for some people, for just few corporations around the world that controls everything. So I think the fight is to try to free her from the kidnapping of the system. That's what I think.
And just the last question, following up on what you were saying. During the conversation of deconstructing ownership, there were different perspectives about how to resist the system. Do we step out of the system and fight from the outside? Do we work from within to shift the system gradually? And as you were describing so eloquently, us being machines, all of Mother Earth being turned into a machine, how do we actually, how do you believe we should try or attempt to resist this machinification of everything? Do we work, like you were saying, within the system, trying to shift it from within? Is it a fight worth having, or we need to look elsewhere and just ignore the system itself?
I think this is a really interesting question. And I think there is not just a simple answer to these questions that you asked me today, including this final one. But, and this is just one perspective, but what I think and what I feel and what I see right now is that this is happening in different ways. So I think that every effort just counts, because from talking about me, my role in this situation is to challenge the legal narratives that were imposed on us as a lawyers from the beginning, from when we entered the law school with this colonialist framework, even the way how we look, how a lawyer should look. Like a lawyer, I don't look like a lawyer, actually. They told me this all the time. I don't dress as a lawyer. I don't behave as a lawyer. I don't feel or think as a lawyer. So I think in some parts is needed to have people within the system just to challenge this. And what I mean within the system is not just to approve the system, but to make it uncountable, with our presence, with our thinking, with our research, like I have to defend my approach. I told you in a private conversation for my dissertation, and I have to defend why I just decided to not to use a colonialist framework for my interaction with our people. Also, I think some people are in between, and let me give you an example. The Purepecha people in Mexico, what happened there is that they were tired of people taking everything from their trees. They have this exploitation, massive exploitation of the trees in their territory. So they realized that the politicians, the municipal government was linked to all this illegal business. And what they decided to do was to challenge them and just stop that. And they they fight the system, but using the tools that the system gave to them. And how is that? Well, because in the constitution of that province in Mexico, there was an article, there is still an article that talks about self-determination for First Nations people. So they say, okay, they hire some lawyers who work with them to challenge that, okay, if we have the right to self-determination, we are going to say that from now on, we are going to have our own government, like just the traditional way of government is land and our people. They fight and they won, they won, but they are still within the system because even though they organize, they practice the ancestral ways and they have a government that it suits their needs, they are still they still depend on financial resources from the province and from the state, but isn't that like a middle point to do that? Other people, for instance, decide not to receive anything from the state, so you need to be like far away from it, and you have to make make it work without these resources. You need to be creative in order to be out of the system, but I don't think that honestly right now it's possible to be completely out of the system. Maybe if you are one of these First Nations group that have never been contacted, but even then, they have been subject to the interaction with other people which they don't want, and they are also included within the legal framework that the system and the states create for them. So my answer is that every effort is important. It doesn't matter if it's a small one, if it's a activism, if it's academic, if it's like fighting, like resisting with arms. I'm not opposed to that. Like I am not opposed to that. Like I'm not opposed to the Palestinian resistance now, but what is going on in Palestine, just my heart is with Palestine. I need to say that. I believe they have the right to resist. So I believe in combining all these forms to challenge the system in any way that is possible. From the heart and committed to the causes that we believe in. That's my answer to that.
And to sum up all of these inspiring answers that you've given us tonight, I just wanted to ask you a question that I asked the other panelists. And that is, if you were going to be saying one sentence, one or two sentences to Mother Earth right now, based on the conversation we're having, if you're going to be speaking to Mother Earth and telling her something based on what we shared tonight, from the complications and the torturous of the system to the inspiring acts of resistance, what would you share to Mother Earth tonight?
I always talk to her and to other animals besides the human animals. I always said to them that in my case, what I do and my writing is just an act of justice for them. And that I feel really ashamed for what we did to her, in this case to Mother Earth. And I'm committed to challenge this because it's just the right thing to do and because she deserves freedom and justice.
And with those last words of freedom and justice, we're going to end out the night. Thank you so much, Fernanda, for everything you shared. And if you all want to see the first part of this conversation, the Deconstructing Ownership Part 1, you can find the link below the video right here. And if you want to know about the other events by Talking Rivers, you can go to our website, which is also below this video. So thank you so much, and wishing you all an amazing rest of your day.